My name is Mike Morrissey. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer and co-founder of Privacy Engine. We're joined today by Matt Lindley. Matt is the CISO and COO of NINJIO. We've been partnered with NINJIO for some time. They provide really innovative training content for our learning management system on Privacy Engine. So we thought it'd be a great idea to get Matt together with us today, because I have 101 questions to ask, and I've no doubt you do too, with regards to best practice with cybersecurity training, with improving cybersecurity culture and hygiene within an organization. And kind of the big thing for me actually is collaboration and how we can improve it and make it better. So the format of this particular webinar is conversation-based. We're not going to bore you with slides. So if you have questions yourself that you'd like to ask, there's a Q&A section here in Zoom. Please feel free to put your questions in as we go along. The webinar will be approximately 40 minutes, give or take a few minutes on either end. And if there are questions that we weren't able to field or answer for you today, we certainly will follow up with them for you on your behalf and come back to you directly at a personal level. More than happy to do that. So Matt, welcome aboard.
Thank you so much. First I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for hosting this webinar and bringing me in. Really looking forward to the conversation today. Just to reiterate on the partnership for your organization, what you're doing, and the opportunity that we've had to make an impact for cybersecurity as a whole. So appreciate it.
Yeah, no, 100%. I suppose kind of a very departure point for us really would be maybe to give our attendees today a bit of background about NINJIO and about yourself as well.
Yeah, certainly. I've been in cybersecurity for probably the better part of 20 years now. All through the different elements of proactive to reactive. A lot of consulting on the GRC area as well, and certainly a focus within managed services and developing elements within the run maintenance of cybersecurity. I've had an opportunity to go into organizations and perform security assessments, address weaknesses, build out plans, and at the end of the day, and this gets me to what led me to my role here at NINJIO, is that almost unequivocally, right, on the both proactive and reactive end of cybersecurity, we saw that the human element, right, was the most impactful area for preventing cyber attacks. We see that in the data on why we see a breach. We also see that on the proactive end of process, people, and technology. People are such an important component of the overall. In about 2019, I joined NINJIO. NINJIO is a security awareness training organization, and not just focused on the content side of it, but really and we're going to talk a little bit about kind of the evolution of cybersecurity awareness as a whole, and kind of our journey with NINJIO to build in more of that ecosystem. But joined NINJIO because I saw an opportunity to really focus on the human element as a whole, as making one of the most important aspects in changing that trend of organizations preventing breaches. We create security awareness training every single month based on a topic that is relevant and contemporary with an event that's happened in the real world, right? A major breach or a major event, and we use micro-learning to tell that story with Hollywood storytelling as well, and then have a program wrapped around that to engage learners and continually test them.
Yeah, I mean that Hollywood storytelling is an important kind of unique aspect actually to NINJIO that perked my ears up at the time when we first came across you. Maybe you might provide a little bit of background about how content is actually created in NINJIO itself.
Yeah, certainly. So we have a pretty unique process, and when our founder Zach Schuler started NINJIO, he kind of looked at the current state of events with security awareness training, which traditionally was a 45-minute lecture-based PowerPoint presentation. And Zach's approach was to take something and most importantly, make it engaging, right? We know that people learn with storytelling much better than with a lecture, and if you can engage the learner, keep their attention, and then use short, bite-sized bits of information through that storytelling, we know we're going to have a much more impactful opportunity to, ultimately train and change behavior for the user. We have an in-house animation team, and we develop a couple different styles of animation. We have a Hollywood scriptwriter who I work with to come up with the topics, look at the most pervasive threats going on, and weave that into a story. And from there we take output a script. We have both celebrity voice actors and professional voice actors that then we go through a recording process. One of the other elements in making something engaging is just the voice actor's ability even, right, and having that professional touch to get the learner engaged, right, to make it very compelling and keep them attached to it. From there, we have a really talented animation team that creates an episode within roughly, once it gets to the animation phase, within a 3-week period, right? And so that allows us to produce content every single month to have a frequency element as well.
So taking that into account, then, I suppose the first kind of primary question that I've always been quite interested to understand, particularly from the subject matter expert like yourself, is cybersecurity training. It's been around a long time, but it's clearly evolved over the last couple of years. So I mean, I suppose just for the attendees here today, from your perspective, how has it evolved up to this particular point in time with regards to the methodologies that are being used, but also the key topics that have become over time more important?
Certainly, and we've already hit on a couple of those components, and some of the things that NINJIO has done differently. Traditionally from a lecture-based approach, long format training, where maybe 14 topics are covered in the first 10 minutes and beyond, and it makes it very difficult to retain that information, right, when it's very linear in that nature and technical. And so we've seen, certainly a trend, over the last couple of years in adopting, more of a storytelling approach. Also converting over from that annual format. Now, realize for a lot of organizations from a regulatory perspective, there's going to be a component to require, training. And oftentimes organizations, or at least traditionally, they would look at that as and we've all heard of the check the box exercise to get that training complete. So you make sure you don't run into any regulatory snags. However, we know that frequency is one of the most important components of an effective security awareness training program, right? To truly change behavior. So organizations, taking that program and making sure that there's frequency in content. In addition to that, and this is another shift we've seen in awareness training programs, and all of these backed up by efficacy, right? We're seeing what's working, and we're seeing programs adapt on a wider scale. And certainly as NINJIO evolves, we're implementing technology and content to match what's going to be most effective, and that is another element, meeting the learner where they're at, right? Various types of content, mediums, different ways to engage, and even delivery mechanisms. Some people respond much better to training through emails or blogs or video or short bite-sized infographics, and all these different areas within a program to create an overall delivery mechanism. We're seeing increased efficacy and performance. Changes from mandatory to voluntary to mandatory, right? Really implementing a program that is taken seriously, and this goes into a lot of the cultural aspects of the organization as well, right? Shifts in boards and executive teams starting to pay a lot more attention to this area, right? Understanding the effectiveness and the importance, and also making it more of a mandatory component, not just for the annual check the box exercise, but for the ongoing elements as well. We're seeing trends in better tools to measure the strengths and weaknesses of the individual learners, so that the programs can be a bit more personalized, and of course ways for organizations to engage the learners through gamification, positive reinforcement opportunities and programs, and then really taking what traditionally was a reactive approach to security awareness and looking a lot more into how can we be proactive about this, how can we engage users and learners, and not just the training itself, but provide systems that allow them to participate, right? To really internalize that their role is crucial in the overall effectiveness. And last thing I'd like to mention is just the development and maturity of measurement, KPIs and KRIs, and organizations really starting to fine-tune, measure elements of the program, set goals, and then track efficacy along the way to make sure the program is doing what it needs to do, and then make adjustments along the way. Every organization and culture and aspect is so unique, and so that bespoke customization opportunity to provide effectiveness is really going to make a huge benefit to the organization's effectiveness of the program.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to that a bit later. It's one of the questions that I have for you actually is about data-driven decision making and supporting privacy programs and cybersecurity teams in providing meaningful metrics back to senior executives and boards. But before I get onto that, the impression that I get of what you've been saying to me over the last couple of minutes is, psychology and a lot of psychology research has clearly gone into how cybersecurity has evolved over the last couple of years to make it engaging with people. I would assume that's true, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's there's definitely a scientific approach to how the programs are put together that go alongside the people's behavior, why they behave, why they learn, how brains work, how people create episodic memories to ultimately be able to bring those up and act on those memories, right, when they see different signs.
So just within that context then, I suppose based on the data you've acquired over the years doing this particular work, how effective is cybersecurity training? And in a general sense, obviously NINJIO from a specific sense then, to be preemptive, to support an organization in preempting cybersecurity threats at the human personal level?
Yeah, I think, and we can see this in data from, security threats over the last, couple of years, or security breaches over the last couple of years. Take Verizon's data breach investigations report. A couple of years ago, the output was that 95% of breaches were accounted for human error. And over the last couple of years, and the shift in security awareness training with what NINJIO is doing, and even other organizations, we've seen that statistic start to drop, right? Which is a great sign. I think the latest one was 82%. Previously, the year before that, 85% related to human error, and then from 95%, initially to 92%. So we're seeing improvements. At the end of the day, cyber criminals are still targeting humans because that's where they're realizing their effective rates. And that, as we continue to see the cyber gang organizations mature and create really effective playbooks, around their targeted attacks, and even the tools that are helping them carry out those attacks. This is where security awareness training is so key, right? Because this is, this is our threat, right? Cyber criminals are attacking people within organizations, and they're becoming more and more, effective at that. So we need to make sure that our programs can continue to be, more and more effective. And there's a key element that I do want to talk about in that, right? An organization can implement training. An organization can implement testing, right? But that's a very small piece of the puzzle. A lot of it still comes down to the organization's, commitment and buy-in to weave these elements into the culture, right? Weave these elements into the mission, vision, value of the organization. It starts from the board and the executive team, and really does require a collaborative approach across all different areas of the organization. And that's where, NINJIO has been really successful in creating, programs that help engage, help educate, and help bring all these different components together to, create and weave more of this, cultural element into the organization that is very much baselined around security awareness, and, continuing to drive that.
Yeah, just one of the questions that's just come in that I just seen here, and it kind of ties into my own next question, is, well, the question has been asked is, how do you engage with roles that are perceived to be less techy, right? So like, and obviously there are, right, particularly in public sector, I think it's fair to say that there are particular roles where people are completing tasks that sometimes are very manual. They may not be very digitalized. They may also as well be operating in business functions that haven't changed a lot over the years, right? So I mean, from a cybersecurity perspective, how do you, from an NINJIO perspective, what's your advice about engaging with what is by definition a diversified set of employees that most organizations have, with different technical experience and expertise? And that then segues itself into the question that I was going to ask, is what are the actual key topics that really, a privacy program, whether you're an SME or an SMB as the case may be, or an enterprise, should be looking to tackle as an initial point of departure, and then progressing on, taking into account the viewer's question as well?
Yeah, it's an important question. Yeah, I like to categorize security awareness training into two top-level kind of fundamental categories. One, you have the more technical, training, how to spot business email compromise. What is business email compromise? What's ransomware? What are the various ways that one can, become victim of a ransomware attack? There's this other side of security awareness training that is much more behavior and how we process information.
Right.
And what's interesting about this one, and this is an area that over the last couple of years NINJIO has been really focused on, because without looking at how we process information, why we react to certain things, for example, I might be someone who is very eager to be responsive and make sure I look good in front of my boss. And so if I receive an email, I might from my boss or the CFO asking for a wire transaction, I might have a predisposition to react very quickly to that without really thinking, right? Without really validating and verifying that information. And so that's one key element where when we look at things like that are less technical, verify before you trust, right? Yeah. These are elements that I think we can train on and have, frequency of why these other components are important. See something, do something, right? These are actions that are less technical, but really help us at a baseline, prevent falling victim to cyber attacks by simply kind of stopping and changing, certain non-technical behaviors, right? And so when we look at the different categories of training, and certainly related to the question around how do we address a common audience, I think there's a lot of this foundation on where we can, talk about these non-technical things and address why they're important, how they relate to, your role, and ultimately, as long as we still have peppered in the more technical elements, so that we can acclimate ourselves with why these things are, important, and really start to understand like how I spot and identify threats, just to feel more confident and comfortable, then that creates more of a holistic program overall. With our training, and this is the last point I'd like to make for the question around the different types of training, we create content that, for the most part, and we do have role-specific items that are going to be more meaningful for finance teams or more meaningful for HR. Even a couple items that might be, have more technical elements related to, teams handling, sensitive data with higher elevations of access. At the end of the day, our training is developed and designed for anyone, as long as they're processing some type of information, they have an email account. We want to make sure and create these foundational baselines that are going to be meaningful to the widest audience, and then build from there from our catalog. Because we create so much content over time, we have over 80 pieces of different content we've created for our WARE program, plus compliance specific content for specific areas of privacy and regulatory issues. We have a pretty wide opportunity to hit that general baseline that makes sense for a wide audience, and then build on that over time.
Yeah, what I would add as well, just to the point you made there with regards to the delivery of training, is I would also contextualize the training with standard operating procedures and get people familiar with them. So there's, alongside the learning aspect of this that comes from engaged content from, say, NINJIO, that you should also look to subsume within that as well additional in-house based processes that can be understood by an employee. And obviously it's critical that you make them accessible to everybody. So if you've got people with different degrees of skill sets and knowledge or expertise, as the case may be. So for example, case in point is the phishing. Like phishing is such a huge issue. We hear about it all the time with clients of ours. It's a continuous problem, and it's been going on many years. And actually, in some respects, the criminals are trying to achieve the same thing. It's just they're using different techniques to get there. But when it comes to phishing, particularly for a smaller organization, it can be absolutely critical if it's ransomware that gets deployed as a payload onto your environment that locks you out of core folders within a server or within a series of laptops. It can be hugely costly. So what's critically important, I think, when doing the training is that your staff are made aware of a process they need to follow when an event that they suspect is suspicious has been triggered. And if you keep it simple, keep it clear and easily understood, regardless of the individual's technical competence, you should be in a good place to be able to kind of create a standardized, minimum set of best practices then for people to work off. Just as a matter of interest, then, one of the questions I was going to ask was the difference between, say, small, medium businesses and enterprises. Now, one of the things that enterprises would obviously probably deal with more than small and medium businesses is multicultural aspects, multiple languages, and things like that. From your experience, what has been your experience in NINJIO with regards to, where you have employees across multiple jurisdictions and you're trying to get them all down a common path? Is that something that you've come across?
Yeah, absolutely. And just through the evolution of, NINJIO, over the last 6 or 7 years, working toward accommodating all these different, audiences. If you look at our roster, we, don't necessarily focus in any sort of, industry. We're relatively, category agnostic. We work with organizations that are, 10 employees up to, hundreds of thousands of employees that have international, audiences that we need to cater toward to create an effective audience. There's a component of this that goes into the content creation itself as well, right? As we're creating content that we know is going to, need to be engaging and effective for an international audience, there's a lot of interesting components that we needed to challenge ourselves with to make sure that that was effective for those different pockets of culture, as you mentioned, and different language. One key element and a decision that NINJIO made very early on for a couple of reasons, but plays really nicely into making sure we can cater to a large audience, is focusing our content by using drama versus comedy. Now, not to say we don't sometimes have some levity, in our episodes, but one of the reasons that decision was made and where it becomes effective with an international audience is comedy doesn't cross borders that well, right? Something that's funny in one area may not be funny, and all it takes is one small element to disengage, an audience or a learner, right? And so we wanted to make sure to create an opportunity that, does have, the widest audience and widest opportunity to, accommodate that, because engagement is key. Without engagement, you can't have retention. Without retention, of that knowledge, you can't really drive that, behavior change ultimately. Another reason that we focus on drama is, when people are creating, episodic memories, if there's an emotional tie and an emotional component, whether that's, something that is highly relatable in the episode, right, in the story, or, an event that, is relatable, or a connection in the episode between a family dynamic that we've pulled in and told as part of the story, we can really embed those memories or create longer lasting memories toward that episode that make it much easier for someone to pull up and recognize when they are seeing those particular threats come across their own perspective. We translate into 22 different languages today. Part of that process as well is making sure that as we're creating that content, we go through a secondary process where we localize that content and change small aspects of that to make it more meaningful to the local audience. All these things are crucial for having an effective program. And when you look at the difference between enterprise to small business, these are a lot of the challenges that an enterprise business is facing.
Right. So let me put you on the spot, right? A question I suppose a lot of people will be wondering here, right? So you started as the CISO or IT security manager in an SMB, right, an SME, and you're tasked with setting up a cybersecurity training program. What would your approach be? Where would you start? What would you prioritize? Question mark.
Yeah, it's a great question because oftentimes, and this is where when we work with larger organizations, one of the biggest challenges is starting with that top-down buy-in. But that's really an important place to start, right? Because without at the end of the day, where I've seen programs be the most effective is when you have participation across all areas of the organization. That participation can be anywhere from management, encouraging their teams and helping, their team's weaknesses within the cybersecurity program, and have a proactive approach to, HR, making sure that the communication, approvals and communication elements are, tied in and built and thoughtful to make sure that the culture is continuously weaved in. And so, really, I'd say it starts there. And if you can get, board and executive buy-in, and sometimes that takes, a fair amount of education for that part. Why is it important? What's going to be the impact? Here's the risk, here's our KPIs, and here's our measurement of success. And so if we can, build all those components, educate the board, get that buy-in, it makes it a lot easier for organizations to, fully, integrate the cultural components of it, and ultimately have a more successful program. It also sends a big message to the learners of the organization. Cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility, right?
Yeah.
And traditionally, it was, if you ask the question that whose responsibility is cybersecurity, oftentimes the answer would be IT or the CISO or the technology team or my manager. Cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility, and that's why that cultural aspect is so important. And I'd say another element of success in leveraging experts that are very familiar with different tools on how to engage your teams, how to through positive reinforcement mature that engagement and evolve the program. And then of course, going back to those KPIs, KRIs, right? Develop them, measure them, track them. See where we're successful and make changes along the way to continue to mature that program.
I'm just wondering, is it possible? I don't know the answer to this, but I'm just positing this question on the fly that I'm just thinking about here. Is it possible to train people to recognize a potential risk and know to flag it before they do anything? Now, this is a fundamental thing, right? Because so many problems when it comes from a human perspective are people unintentionally triggering something that they shouldn't have triggered. And because they didn't take that second to stop and think, right? And I'm just wondering, is it at all psychologically, is it technically possible to train people as a starting point to, it's kind of like, the learning to cross, or the safe cross code kind of rules we would have learned as kids. They don't really show that anymore on TV, but when we were growing up here in Ireland, it was always on TV, the ads. It was just this constant drilling people into, there's this process you need to follow, kids, before you cross the road, right? I'm wondering, is there something similar that can be done? Is it possible? Has it been done? Does it work?
There's a couple different sides to cybersecurity awareness. The reactive side, which is traditionally, send training, did someone take it? Send a simulated phishing test, what was the click-through rate? I think the more a program can involve, a system that invites the learners to participate proactively, let them know that they are making a positive impact, that their actions are being recognized in a positive capacity. There's a whole other conversation around the carrot and stick approach with security awareness training that we may not have time to dive into too deep, but what we've seen really work with engaging the learners at that area to proactively participate and make an impact, and when they're processing information, stop and think, because that they know that their role is important in this. And that goes back to the non-technical, more behavior, data processing component of someone's role, right? If we can instinctually kick that in. And as a side note, what we like to say is that instinctually or innately, we have a physical security awareness or persona that we have. When we leave the house, we lock the door. When we go to the grocery store, we lock our car. It's just kind of built in. But the digital security identity is something that is as humans, we are more often going to trust instinctually versus verify before we trust instinctually, right? And so those are the core components, but an organization needs to set up those programs that invite the learners and let them know where it's important, where to participate. And oftentimes we even see someone who can, move through those phases of starting to see their role and recognize their role and their importance. It's almost the student becomes the teacher, right? Once they start bringing other people in to, hey, I reported this threat and, prevented something from the organization, people start coming to them with questions, right? And they become more a thought leader in this process, so to speak.
No, it's interesting stuff. There's so much depth when it comes to these types of questions around human behavior. And how you not that you want to fashion or seem to be manipulating it, which is probably the wrong word, but you do want to get people into a frame of thinking about, you know, their digital engagement. It's not just digital though. I mean, there's organizations that deal with paper records all the time as well, but it's just getting people into that kind of psychological state where they have a kind of a broader awareness of what's going on without necessarily knowing the answers, but to recognize a risk, to recognize danger, you know, and to be able to act in the right way with regards to it. I think if you can actually, you know, you're not looking for people to fix problems, but what you're looking to do is prevent people from triggering problems, right? That's partly the way you're trying to approach it. And and I would suspect, and we may come back to this a little bit in terms of my last question about where cybersecurity training is going to come down the line. Just the other question, one of the questions that's been asked, although I think I've said something off here with somebody saying about the idea of a superhero called the Green Cross Goldman. But there is a question that's been asked about whose remit is it to conduct training? And the question was asked, is it the remit of the IT department? Because that, in fairness, historically has, you know, they've been landed with it, really. It's not necessarily that it's, well, although sometimes they want to take it because nobody else is owning it within the organization. But from your experience, what's best practice there? I mean, who should be managing and being responsible for the IT security training, the cybersecurity training?
You know, traditionally we've seen you know, cyber teams or IT manage this, but you know, if we talk about that long-term nirvana state of having an effective program, collaboration is so key, right?
Right.
And going back to some of our earlier you know, dialogue on you know, the cultural aspects and you know, what's going to make a successful program. You know, from all different, you know, teams, this really should be something that's integrated. The KPIs should be shared. There should be, you know, measurements of success across the teams, maybe even healthy competition across the teams. You know, HR should be aware of, you know, how we're doing from a risk perspective. And even when we talk about how do we weave that culture in of cybersecurity from mission, vision, values, that becomes, you know, even decision making from the hiring front. You know, what are some of the key values that we're looking for, you know, in folks joining the organization? Cybersecurity should be an element of that, right? Most organizations are responsible for managing other people's data, PII. And so the, you know, constituents of the organization, you know, that very much should be a core you know, value as well. And I think HR's role, and when we look at the broader ecosystem of all the different departments working in, you know, conjunction to ultimately mitigate risk and, you know, drive awareness and, you know, all these elements. And this gets a bit into, you know, how I see things, you know, evolving in the industry. You know, we're getting data from, you know, all sorts of different parts of the organization. You know, HR has data on certain areas of, you know, employee engagement, for example. You know, cybersecurity awareness training is just one element of that engagement, but the more we can bring and collaborate on this data to look at the broader picture and have, you know, very intentional, you know, proactive guidance on how we can, you know, take this information for the state of a security, you know, awareness overall and continue to build on that. That takes, you know, collaboration and integration as well from, you know, a lot of different components. You know, take Privacy Engine, for example, right? These are really important tools to help, you know, manage, respond to, you know, and implement the appropriate processes to mitigate risk. That's just another element of, you know, key data points and KPIs that, you know, might be managed across, you know, different teams to ultimately create a, you know, more secure environment as a whole.
So just taking into account everything you said then, do you think that boards and executives should be included in cybersecurity training by default?
Absolutely. You know, traditionally, right, I think this is probably a conversation that's been had many times and still tends to be, you know, a very large challenge. You know, and I think the more we can mature security awareness training programs to really tie into the risk of the organization, what is a specific risk, how are we measuring that risk, the better opportunity we're going to have to educate board and executives on why this is important and what their role is. We're also seeing regulatory, items help, promote that involvement, right? Certainly starting to even require more engagement from the board to discuss these items. So there's other conditions that are, I think, promoting our opportunity for success in bringing that education. As far as the training program itself, though, and I think there are different sets of training, different components of that training that are going to be more meaningful to the board. And the more we can have an adaptive program that meets the learner where they are, whether it's a board member, an executive, an employee across all different levels, the more we can understand what's meaningful to them, what drives them, we can create more effective, programs overall, the board certainly included.
So just with regards then to boards and senior executives, you talked earlier on about KPIs. So one of the key things I think that, and I think privacy programs in general are going to come across this more as well, is data-driven metrics and objective risk assessment with regards to the risk that an organization is carrying, and being able to report back up at a senior level. And if you're in the private sector, be able to then be in a position to provide meaningful metrics around cost savings, profitability, the usual types of parameters that businesses look at when they're making decisions on investing into a particular area. And obviously, cybersecurity is one of those areas. There's a huge amount of money that is being invested by a lot of organizations on a daily basis, but more and more now, those investments have really hard-nosed figures behind them to be able to justify them. And I would assume cybersecurity is the same. So, I mean, from your perspective, what kind of KPIs, what kind of meaningful metrics should a cybersecurity training program be looking to deliver?
There are probably different sets across the maturity levels of an organization's overall program, right? The most basic element, engagement. Engagement is so key. From there, it might be looking at, to define engagement, did someone take the training? Was it mandatory? Was it voluntary? And what were the results of that training, right? There's usually a quiz element in there. How well did they do? Did they understand the information? From there, additional, testing phases along the way as to, how prepared are they to spot threats, and then retention, right? So that is the retention metric. We've trained on these things. What's our ability to retain that information across staff and respond to those threats? So at the most basic level, but as we're evolving, there's a lot of opportunity to look at other telemetry across, and we're just talking about whose role is the cybersecurity awareness training? Is it HR or compliance or IT or a cyber team? The more we can start to look at the telemetry, we're able to measure different risk areas and bring a tie-in to how are we improving our risk in these different areas based on the training. Then we can start to develop other KPIs and KRIs. One example might be a reduction in malware, right, from our IT systems. Another metric might be measuring proactive involvement. How many learners are not only reporting threats through a phish reporting mechanism, for example, are they reporting them accurately? Are they just using it as a spam filter? Are they able to report accurately a test phishing email? And how is the training impacting our improvement along the way? And it continues to become more and more opportunity as we tie in this other telemetry on but it all starts with a foundation of engagement and retention, right? At the very end of the day, if we can capture those and increase those two areas, we're evolving the program and likely making a positive impact in risk reduction.
Yeah, I think a critical metric to report on, just tying in to what you're saying there, is staff reporting on positives. So basically reporting on actual malware or phishing attempts that may have got through, for example, any kind of anti-phishing or anti-malware solutions you've deployed. If you use Office 365 as an example, Office 365 Defender provides an awful lot of inbuilt features to basically stop a lot of phishing and anti-malware coming through, but it doesn't stop everything. So and obviously over time, if you can show and demonstrate from point A to point B, we have significantly improved our reportability coming in from staff who are positively identifying these issues. You can correlate that directly then into what should also be a significant drop in the number of potential issues you have with phishing or malware as well. So things like that, the reporting thing is critical. There's so much of it is dependent upon your staff not triggering something. And if they have the awareness to detect it and recognize it, and even over time to improve in their recognition to actually stop sending false positives, all those metrics are, I think, really positive in terms of showing and demonstrating the reduction of your surface threat area, so to speak, as they use that parlance in cybersecurity. So there's a lot you can do. There's a lot of analytics and metrics that you can build up, and then KPIs over time. Because what you could start doing as well, I think, over time, is once you've started bedding in some of these processes, you start improving on them. So increase the number of reports coming in, or decrease the number of false reports coming in, and be able to demonstrate competence then within the overall organization. Boards love that stuff. They like to see that in graphs.
Well, Mike, KPIs drive behavior, right? And so as soon as we can start measuring these, set baselines and set goals, we have a program, right? We have a direction. And so that's where these conversations are really important, and understanding, some of the KPIs that are going to be important for each individual organization. There's one other I want to bring up, and that is being proactive, right? When someone, then they may have even been a victim of a threat. They may have clicked on that phishing email. They may have put in their username and password, and then subsequently realized, oh no, this looks fishy. What have I done? Taking action to then report that into the security team to potentially, prevent a, larger issue altogether. And that's another area that we're really encouraging organizations, right? It's okay if, you have made a mistake. Being proactive and reporting that is I think a really other important element in the culture and in the measurement, the KPI measurement.
Yeah, that's a massive one, right? Because so many of these issues, when they get triggered, are so time sensitive, that you need to act quickly. So people can't be afraid to report it. And unfortunately, I think so many of these vulnerabilities don't get reported in time, and so much damage has been caused that could have been prevented. And there's obvious enough reasons why people don't report them, because they're afraid to, or they don't know that it's okay to report them. So yeah, that's a huge one. My very last question before I let you go then, right? Because we started off in the beginning. My first question is, where is cybersecurity best practice? Where does it come from? Training? Where has it kind of got to? Looking into your crystal ball, right? Where is it going in, let's say, the next 10 years? What do you think cybersecurity training will look like?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about our opportunity to look at other telemetry as to just risk in the organization. I think that's a big one, right? Understanding, and being able to correlate that information to make meaningful insights, and then meaningful decisions on how to pivot. And when we talk about those decisions, once we're able to identify a particular risk, whether it's a risk from behavior, a risk from a particular threat that might be hitting the organization, a risk from a trend or an introduction of a new, piece of software or process. Once we can measure that, we need to have, not just a reading of that risk, but we need to have information and proactive response, and what do we do with that, right? Because just being aware of the risk is I think an important piece of the puzzle, but ultimately it's a very small piece of the puzzle. And so where I see security awareness training continuing to mature, and we're seeing a lot of this now, is being able to have more adaptive,
Yeah.
risk-based programs that more effectively address the learner for where they're at, what are their weaknesses, what are their strengths, and what's going on, on a macro level across the organization, right? To fully leverage, the best opportunity to close those gaps, right? And it comes down to integration, and then also the right information to then, define the proactive approach to addressing that.
Yeah, it's a logical thing. It does strike me as being the next stage of this is individualized training. There's obviously there's questions about how you make that effective and non-intrusive. But I mean, particularly from a data protection perspective, automated profiling. But at the end of the day, it's a logical thing that you want to be able to achieve. But I think what's critical is exactly what you guys are doing, is making the content engaging. Like as if you're watching a Netflix show, right? That you're enthused by it, you're interested in the subject, you care about the characters that you're watching and learning from, and you're gaining something out of that. It's kind of a dialectic. It's this back and forth engagement that empowers you as the individual to be more knowledgeable and, more importantly, be more aware, so that you can make the right decisions, or make sure you don't find yourself in a situation that you could have avoided if you had the necessary tools and awareness beforehand. So yeah, it's be very interesting to see where it goes in the next couple of years.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, Matt, listen, I think that's it. I don't think there are any other questions, and you've covered off all mine as well. It's been very, very useful, very helpful, and hopefully everybody who's attended today as well has got some good value out of it. And if you have any questions, please feel free to let us know. We're happy to field those questions to Matt and come back to you at an individual level if required. But hopefully, Matt, we'll get you on again and we can delve into some of these topics, particularly the metric stuff. I think you could spend a whole session on that, just kind of, looking at some of the case studies and some of the best practice examples, and the classic scenario of avoiding the argument of, correlation is not causation. So how you make sure to analyze your data in the right way to provide meaningful feedback and make some proper decisions for yourself as a business from a security perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah, I look forward to that future conversation, Mike. It's been a pleasure. Want to thank the audience and participants as well. And hope everyone, stays secure out there.
Yeah, stay secure. Listen, Matt, thank you very much. Matt Lindley, CISO of NINJIO, and thank you everybody for attending today. And we'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.